This is a crazy story, y'all. Absolutely insane, and none of us saw it coming. Okay, so Dad, 5 nights ago, woke up in the middle of the night coughing like a madman. Like, he said every 30, 40 minutes he would wake up just wretched with coughing. Like, he couldn't stop. He said repeatedly he felt like the neighbors were going to come kick him out of the neighborhood. Like, he was miserable. And my dad loves to sleep. So this was... and he's sick, clearly. So, like, he's not in the best mood, and he can't sleep. So he calls his GP on Monday, and I'm sure was not happy, and told them that he needed something to help him sleep. They called him in a medicine, a cough syrup. I'll post it somewhere on here right now so you can see it, because it's not, there's no name on it. It's like letters was the name of it. And you only take 5 milliliters, which is a teaspoon, twice a day. He was so happy. He took it that first night and he slept. Actually, I think he took it that afternoon, because he was taking it at 3 in the afternoon, and then he would take it at 3 in the morning. So he was so happy. I talked to him the next day. He felt so much better. He sounded better. He sounded pretty good. The next day we talk, because, he's sick. And so I have not even brushed my hair yet this morning. It's been a long couple of days. Anyway, he starts telling me something crazy that had happened the night before. He said, I woke up at 3 and I was so confused. I thought it was 3 in the afternoon. He said, and I got up and I went to get the mail, and it was dark outside, but I just thought a storm was coming, which is odd. I mean, pitch black, like, it's like Dorothy kind of storm, like, run inside. But he was confused. And so he gets inside, and there was a piece of mail from my brother. And so he calls my brother at 3 in the morning. And honestly, my brother said he thought something was wrong with Mom. And just begins to tell him about his mail. And so Rob is just like, something's wrong. This is so weird. And he tells Daddy it's 3 in the morning. And so that kind of, helps Daddy understand. And they get off the phone. So Daddy tells me about it, the next day. That was odd. It's a little different. The next day, which was day before yesterday, I call him, tell him that I want to make a big pot of gumbo. I'd never made gumbo before, but for some reason I just decided, I'm going to make gumbo. And I would bring him a loaf of sourdough bread. That's my big passion lately, is making sourdough bread. I was going to make it also for Chaz and Camber, because Ace had the flu. He was better, but I was like, be a nice little meal. So anyway, I'm making this giant batch for the 2 sick people in the family. And I called Dad. Actually, this was the day before. So I called Dad to make sure he would, want that. And he said, yes, he would. I talked to him around 1 o'clock. So that was the plan. So around 7:30 that night, his sister calls me, my Aunt Beth, to tell me that Dad sounded confused on the phone. So this is like 7:30, almost 7:45 by the time we get off the phone. But she was telling me he started talking about Cane's chicken, and he's talking about he was with me that morning, and he wasn't. And she could just tell. He even stopped at one point and said, something seems off. I need to think about this. And he was getting frustrated, and he told her he'd call her back, and he never did. So here we are at 7:30. That was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 7:30. She's still not heard from him, and he's not answering his phone. Well, Daddy likes to sleep. We've already established that. So I told her, I was like, I'm going to let him sleep. I'm not going to wake him up tonight. I'll call him in the morning, because I know he needs to rest, and I'm sure he just took that medicine. But I even told her I'm starting to see that this medicine might be a little too strong for him. Maybe, I'll bring him something else, give him something else that might help him sleep at night, but maybe isn't so strong. I was starting to see the cracks. So the next morning, I called his cell phone, no answer. So I called the house phone, which is rare. We don't normally use the house phone. And my brother answers. It took me a while to figure out it was my brother. They have a cell phone attached to the house phone. Daddy, that's a whole other story I might be telling here real soon. He went to Cox for a phone issue in the house, and they talked him into the cell phone instead of regular house phones. Well, my brother's phone died, and he had lent the house cell phone to my brother. So when I call and I get him, he's out wherever. Actually, he was on his way to work. But he has that cell phone from the house. He says, "You're not going to believe what just happened." He said, "I just dropped Dad off." And I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Dad called me last night at 1:30 in the morning." And they live in a suburb around Baton Rouge. Dad does. Rob lives in a little city just off of that. He said, "Yeah, Dad called me and said, at 1:30 in the morning, said, I am at the Gulf Coast." He thinks he's in Mississippi. And he's like, "I can't find that school, that you wanted me to go watch them play football." My brother is a football coach. And he's like, "Dad, what are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm over here. You'd asked me to come and watch that game and see what I thought. And I can't find the school." And he's like, "Dad, we're not playing Mississippi this weekend. We're playing Lafayette." What he was remembering was from a year ago. And he wasn't in Mississippi. Rob said, "Tell me some of the landmarks around you," because Daddy couldn't figure out where he was. He starts rattling off landmarks. He's in Metairie. He's just outside of New Orleans. So Rob is steady putting clothes on, 1:30 in the morning. He's an hour and a half away from Dad at least, in the middle of the night, and he goes flying to get to Dad. Dad is trying to drive to a place he knows in New Orleans from years ago. By the time Rob gets to Dad, Dad is in one of the worst areas that he could be in. And he's so confused. He actually thinks a man's in his back seat that he's been talking to, but the man won't talk back to him. So he's hallucinated this man. He saw a woman walking down the street who then walked into a wall and opened it like it was a door and walked through it. He saw that. Like complete hallucination. He is completely confused. By the time Rob gets to him, they need to find a place to leave his car. My dad does not want to leave his car. He loves his car. It's a used car, but he adores that car. At one point, he's following Rob, and he honks his horn, and he wants Rob to pull over, and he's like, "We lost our hitchhiker." And Rob's like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, we lost our hitchhiker, the guy that was in my back seat." And Rob looks, he's like, "Dad, there was never anybody in your back seat." So it's just absolute craziness. Also, Dad is in Crocs. My dad never leaves the house in Crocs. My dad is old school. He leaves the house dressed in jeans and a nice shirt, nice shoes, shaven. He's not shaved. He does not have his glasses. He left them at home. He drove for hours in the dark. My dad doesn't drive in the dark. Drove for hours in the dark with no glasses. He can't even read street signs that way. Thought he was in Mississippi. He was in New Orleans. Absolute insanity. And so, obviously, that medicine, and it could have also been the medicine, and he had actually sipped a beer, which he shouldn't have done. But I think the medicine kind of probably took away any thought process that he shouldn't be drinking a beer, which probably made it worse. And if the pneumonia was taking oxygen away from his brain, which they have discovered, and that's why he's in the hospital right now, then that could have contributed. But it was a storm of hallucinations and confusion, and thank you, Jesus, that Rob got to him and got him back home safely. And we've taken that medicine away from him. But yeah, his doctor gave him that medicine. Never even eyeballed him. Didn't even listen to the fact that the man had the beginnings of pneumonia. Just called him in a medicine that strong. That's insanity. So there's the story. There's the story.